Testing, testing. Can we hear me? Let's see. Testing, testing, testing. Yeah, it's working. It's working pretty good. All right. Let's get this thing started. Music. Ooh. Oh man, this is exciting. I'm nervous. I got the shakes a little bit. I don't do a whole lot of live stuff, so this is a big experiment for me. But hey, welcome to Life is Brutal. I'm Anthony. I'm excited. Ooh. Fun fact: you might hear a lot of thunder and potentially some rain going on. We just entered monsoon season here in Arizona, and looks like we got a big storm rolling in. So pretty excited about that because it is hot here. I've been setting this whole thing up, just sweating my ass off. But thank you all very much for being here. I'm excited. Like I said, this is my first live stream, and I'm going to be home brewing on it. So it's going to be a long one. So big learning curve for me here, but I'm excited, especially because we're going to be brewing something very interesting and kind of weird today. We're going to be brewing a CrystAle. And a CrystAle is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily its own beer style yet. There are some breweries out there that are working on making CrystAle more commonplace, but they're definitely not at the forefront of the beer scene right now. To explain what a CrystAle is, it's essentially a beer that is comprised primarily of crystal malts. With up to like 90. I've even seen some anecdotal experiences online talking about 100% crystal malt, but I don't know how accurate that is. I have my suspicions whether this thing is actually possible at all. For those of you who don't know, a crystal malt is essentially a malt that has been kilned in such a way that it doesn't create a lot of usable fermentable sugar. So we're talking about all malt has something called diastatic power, which when it's actually in the mash, it can like convert starches to sugars and things of that nature, based off of enzymatic capabilities. But from what I understand, crystal malt is on the extreme low end, like barely has a threshold of enzymatic activity at all. So the question is, how does a CrystAle, which is comprised of 90%, the one we're brewing today is 90% crystal malt, 10% base malt, which is a higher diastatic capable malt. How is that efficiency going to be converting that starch to sugar? Basically, I'm just trying to figure out, is it possible? Can it be done? And most of all, how is the end result going to be? Because just because I said that the crystal malt doesn't have a huge diastatic capability doesn't mean that there's not sugar in it. In fact, a lot of the common perception around crystal malt is that it's particularly sweet. A lot of old school brewers hate it because they talk about it makes beers cloyingly sweet, or some people believe it adds too much body to it, to the final product in the beer because of the unfermentable sugar nature of crystal malt. But I've been seeing a lot of experiments going on different brewing sites, and it seems that crystal malts maybe don't create as much of a body as people think it does. And perhaps it has a little more diastatic power than people like to think it does. So I don't know. It's interesting. I'm excited to see exactly how this whole thing goes. So let's check in here real quick. All right. So Oh, we got some people checking in. Hey, Middle Fruit. Cheers from Ottawa, Canada, man. It's been a while since I've seen you. Good to have you on here. So, hopefully, I don't embarrass myself too much. Like I said, I'm super new to streaming, so it's gonna be weird for me having to like check in and see what's going on in the chat and everything. But thank y'all for joining me. So the way I think the best way we could make this beer a success is, like I said, we are going to use 10% base malt, which is going to create a little bit more of a diastatic friendly environment. The main thing is, I don't want to use enzymes. I don't want to use any type of additive that would enhance it. Because sometimes if you're using um, grains or any type of malt that doesn't have a high diastatic power, or if you really, really, really want to dry your beer out to either boost the ABV or reduce the mouthfeel, you can add stuff like amylase enzyme and amylase enzyme. That's such a tongue twister, and that basically just exaggerates and drastically boosts your diastatic capability. But I don't want to do that because I think that would ruin the concept of the CrystAle. And the brewery that's really been at the forefront pushing CrystAles is Horace Aged Ales out in, I think it's Oceanside, California, which is San Diego greater area. But from all the research I was able to do on this, it doesn't seem like they're using enzymes to get this effect. It seems like they're just using like traditional brewing techniques to extract as much sugar out of it as we can. So that's the plan. We're going to brew a CrystAle wheat beer. So that was an absolute nightmare setting up this recipe. I had to work with my local homebrew store, going back and forth, looking at all the malt diagrams, seeing what their capabilities were. Because for a wheat wine, which was what I was originally going for, but for a solid wheat beer, we're looking for at least 50% wheat and 50% barley, which we were able to achieve. But we also have to hit that 90-10% ratio for the CrystAle, right? 90% crystal malts, 10% base malt. So we went with 1 pound of white wheat, since that is going to give us a pretty good base, but it's also going to give us a lot of diastatic capability. If I understand it correctly, white wheat has a pretty high diastatic base. Then to continue on with the wheat, we used 40% of our grist is going to be Cara wheat, which is a German crystal wheat malt, which imparts a bit of a darker color. So we're almost looking at Dunkelweizen-ish territory here, but it's also a crystal malt. So it's going to add some of that body, some of that sweetness, if, the rumors are to be believed. Lastly, to make up our the barley percent, which the whole entire barley build is all crystal malt. We're going to be using 10 Levibon Crystal, which is on the sweeter end of crystal malts. It also has a very light color, but supposedly it impacts sweetness, a little bit of body, and not so much in the color. But you're not going to get a whole lot of flavor out of it other than a touch of sweet. And then we're going to also use 2 pounds of 80 Levibon Crystal. Now, when we're looking at this rise in Levibon, especially for crystals, we're talking about getting way more color. We're talking about getting way more of the caramel flavors. So 80 is kind of high up on the Levibon for crystal malt. So we're looking at probably getting some good toffee notes, a good burnt sugar type flavor, not little caramel. So either way, the point is I'm really excited to do this build. So the things that we're really gonna have to focus on here is we're gonna have to be checking its gravity readings throughout this entire process, because based off of the calculations I was able to do, we're looking at an estimated 5% ABV if we were to do just a normal mash run through all this. And we're not going to try to get too complicated with the yeast or the hops. So we're going to use 3 ounces of EKG, which is an English style hop. It's not a noble hop, but it has that like older European type flavors. Some people say it has a touch of citrus. Some people say it has some tea and herbal characters. So I think that'll pair really well with this. And we're looking at a 25 SRM, which is on the darker end of that scale. But the way I think we're going to be able to get the most efficiency out of this is we're going to do a really, really long mash. So we're going to be doing a step mash where we're going to be doing a ferulic acid rest for about 30 to 60 minutes. And that's going to try to break down some of the malt, break down some of the starch in it. And if there is any type of sugar going on in there, hopefully we'll be able to leach it out, because then we're going to go into about a 30 to 60 minute rest for a protein rest. And then finally an actual sack rest, which, like, I've heard a lot of people say step mashing isn't like necessary. It doesn't need to. Malt is so advanced nowadays that we don't need that full, really, really prolonged extraction. But a couple months back, I actually brewed a sati, and I used a traditional long, like 6 hour step mash. And the efficiency I got out of that was amazing. We're talking like not even that much of a. I wish I could remember the weights here, but I wasn't using that much malt, and I was still able to get up to about 8% ABV, and I was just blown away because using like harsher rye and a lot of flake stuff, we didn't lose out on the body either. So I'm hoping I can apply that same technique here, extract as much usable sugar as I can without the use of enzymes. We're just going to have to see what happens. So what we are currently waiting on now, when we're looking at these step mashes, especially if we're going to do something like a ferulic mash or a ferulic rest, we have to get so low down in the temperature. Usually when you're looking at like a good a sack mash or sack rest, we're talking like 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And that would usually last for an hour. But because we're trying to slow leach this out, low and slow is the best method. And the malt, the enzymes within the malts, and the different builds and chemical compounds within the malts, they react to temperature in different ways. So to get this ferulic acid to kind of get out of the malt, we're going to actually have to get it down to 109 degrees. And this, we're going to be brewing on my mash and boil, and that usually sits at like 120. So when I was testing the setup, making sure I wasn't going to blow any fuses, I heated it up just to see if it could reach boiling without shutting down the power to my house. And it's just so hot here that it's been slowly falling. So I'm going to show y'all the little setup we got going on here. And then I'm going to throw some ice into this or something, try to get it down to that temperature, and then we can start mashing. All right. So here we are. We got the whole digital setup. We got our malt build over here. Oh God, I almost knocked over my computer. That would have been awful. And like I said, we're going to be brewing on the mash and boil system. It's what I love brewing most of my beers on. It's just so easy and it's so convenient. And especially when we're brewing things that are going to be using mashes like this, it's really beneficial because we can just set the temperature we want it to be at. For this case, we were talking about that 113. Boom. And that's super convenient because as soon as we start needing to bump up the temperature, it's so easy to just adjust that temperature and it'll rise to where we need to be. Whereas historically, you would have had to like pull water out and you would have had to like adjust it that way. All right, let's get you set back up. Boom. All right. So the mash and boil, it comes with a grain basket where like we're able to put all of our malts in, and it's able to sit in there. It allows for, it prevents stuck sparges and things of that nature. It's pretty good at that, I would say. But it, I don't know, just somebody who learned how to brew with a brew in a bag system. I just, I feel better and safer when I double down and I use a brew in a bag system with the actual grain basket on this. So let's go ahead. And while we wait for the temperature to fall, let's go ahead and get the malt actually into the basket. And if any of y'all get motion sickness, I apologize. This is the first time doing this, so I'm toying around with some interesting camera equipment. Oh my God. Real quick, look at that malt. That is gorgeous. As you can see, it is a little bit of a darker grist that we're going to be going with. A lot of that complex kilning procedures that create such interesting, unique, dark flavors. I am really, really excited. Oh man, it just smells like toffee. It smells like dates. So much complexity, and we haven't even started mashing yet. So I'm pretty excited for this.